Welcome to Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brian LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're joined by first-time guest host, co-founder of the wildly popular Nightworms, Sadie Hartmann. Say hi, Sadie.
Yay!
And we're talking to musician and author amongst many things, Kasey Lansdale. Say hi, Kasey.
Hi, guys.
As well as author of the Happen Leonard series, amongst too much to name, Joe Lansdale. Say hey, Joe.
Hey.
Woo.
Hey, Joe.
You know what? It's all I could do not to do it. And I was like, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have done it.
Lock it in.
Say good night.
Temptation
Gracie.
is overbearing.
Good night, Gracie.
I always say hi to people. So I did hey, Joe for a reason. Jimi Hendricks, man. So normally we ask people when they come on what got you into horror, but this is kind of like a little bit different scenario. Brennan was the one that suggested we have Sadie on, and there's a really specific reason. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but there's one specific reason that Brennan, take it away, and then Sadie, please, by all means, take it away, and anyone jump in, whatever.
Well, I mean, we set this episode up initially because we had Born for Trouble coming out in March. You know, fantastic group of 5 stories. Yay! Yeah, and there's the author. Very excited for that release. And you know, so we wanted to talk to Kasey and Joe about this one, and I'm going to throw it to Sadie in a minute because she's been leading a Happen Leonard read along for those uninitiated who are new to the series. So Sadie, tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
Well, so I decided that I wanted to read the Happen Leonard series for the first time. I haven't seen the show, I hadn't read the series, but I had read a lot of Joe's books and have become an impossibly crazed fan for Joe's work. You know, I've read The Bottom.
You're the one.
I read The Bottoms, I read The Thicket, I've read Freezer Burn, like you name it. I've been going through it, and I finally decided that I was gonna jump into the series, which is like no small feat because I think there's like a dozen books plus some short stories plus the new one that's coming out. But I was able to talk to Kasey about helping me organize the read along because we did have some like diehard fans who wanted to read it again for like the second time or third time, and then people like me who haven't read it before. So I was able to hook up with Kasey and we mapped out like this whole timeline, which I haven't adhered to at all because I keep stopping and reading other parts of Joe's work. I can't, it's hard to just go through the Happen Leonard when I have like Leather Maiden sitting on my nightstand. I had The Thicket I wanted to read. I have Jane Goes North I want to read. I have a signed copy. So he just has like too much work. And it's all good.
So I want to talk about how you set up kind of the timeline, because it's got to be, I mean, you read a lot, obviously. Anybody who has heard of you before, that's not going to surprise them. You read a lot. So, you know, the people who are following along and reading it for the first time, they might not be able to keep up with you. So how do you go about establishing, you know, what the normies would do?
I love my group chat, so I hope this isn't offensive to them at all, but they are slower. And I thought we could get through like a book a month, maybe even 2. And I was getting through 2 a month. But I've had to slow that way down for people so that they could kind of like go at their own pace. And if you aren't familiar with the Happen Leonard series, it is extremely fast paced. Like there's action on every page and there's humor and dialogue. It's extremely character driven. So those pages just fly for me. But yeah, the group chat wants me to slow down. So we've scaled it back a little bit.
Well, and I think we'd originally talked because Born for Trouble comes out this month.
Right.
So we were trying to kind of line it up with the time of that, with the understanding of, you know, that it was going to be later, but that was that was sort of like a loose goal of can we
Yeah.
make it somewhere in that vicinity with the release. So that's kind of funny because we didn't factor that in.
Yeah, it's okay though, because I mean, it's sort of like an epic kind of.
It's an amazing undertaking, and you notice that I stay real quiet in those group chats.
Yes.
It's really neat that your entire family in one branch or another has something to do with, of course, your father, but also the writing industry, amongst other entertainment industries. So I'm going to pull us back to when you were growing up, because Joe says in the beginning of the four, basically, that Hap and Leonard were the annoying brother, or in your case, annoying uncles.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, from your point of view, what has it been like growing up with them?
It's interesting. Yeah, they are like uncles. They've always been there. I had an image in my mind of who they were for a long time until the television show. I never had them in my mind as either James or Michael K. And in fact, James, when he was cast, even other than being British, I thought, okay, I can kind of see that there's an element there. But Michael K didn't look at all how I had pictured Leonard. And now that I've seen him embody that character, I can't not see it. So the reason I tell you that is because I didn't read the books until I was much older. So I just sort of had these two ethereal uncles that kind of floated in and out that were, made reference to, that were a part of my life. Then I saw the television show. I had read the books, some of them, not all of them. I'd say the first 4, I guess, before the television show came out. Actually, during pandemic, I finally read the entire series because I, for the first time, had time. So I'm now caught up on it, but it's always just kind of been this presence there, and they're still there. But I will say that it now is embodied a lot by James and Michael, and the unfortunate passing of Michael, that did feel like a death in the family, even though the character lives on. And Michael obviously is his own human being, and his family is going through whatever they're going through. So not to lessen their experience, but it did feel like the loss of an uncle when that happened. So it's sort of an indescribable thing. It's somebody that you have known your whole life and you've met a handful of times, but you still feel this extreme closeness. And the good thing that we have is they are fictional characters, so we can always reference them. But when I read them, I hear not only my father, but things that he'll reference, and I'll go, oh, I know what the real backstory is behind that, or oh, I wonder if this is this, and it just, I think the heartbreaking moments can hit me harder because of that, and I think the funny moments can hit me harder because of that. So it's sort of a very intense experience of reading his work that is hard to describe unless you're going through it.
Yeah. Wow.
Too much?
I want to, no, not too much. Do you know who your dad is? Come on. But in all seriousness, the passing of Michael, I don't have a specific question to ask about that. So if there is anything that you guys want to say about him, for those that may not know much about him, by all means, please.
Well, I knew Michael a little bit from the show and being on the set, especially the first season a lot, and a little bit after that on the 3rd season. Mike was a really nice, amazing guy and a fascinating actor. He had his own way of going about things, and he and James were best friends, just like Hap and Leonard. And they were like the proverbial old married couple who were like squabbly all the time, and like where you put your glass here or you do that. And James was neater than, and I think it's probably the other way around in the books, but James was kind of neat and Mike wasn't. And Michael, and he did tell me about his struggles with drug problems and stuff, and that he had them. And I hoped that he had, gotten them beat and had that under control. But obviously he did not. I do think sometimes people do a disservice by saying, well, it was laced with fentanyl, which it wasn't. That's terrible. But it's not like he was selling him, chewing gum. He was selling him something that was already dangerous, and then that just made it fatal. And the other itself could have been fatal. So it's just a terrible, terrible addiction, And I know that Michael did everything he could to shake it. And he talked to me about it, and he talked to me about his struggles with it, and about his dogs. And he had two, I think they were like miniature Dobermans, if I remember right. And he said that they were like the biggest cowards that you could imagine. They weren't like ferocious at all, like our pit bull was. It just, he'd help you carry the stereo or something out to the car, if we actually had a stereo anymore. But that sort of thing, and it was just very human stuff. And that's what I remember about Michael. And I remember him coming on the scene and having to do a takes. He had to do multiple takes before he caught it. That's how his process was. Where James was, he was ready after a couple, 3 takes. He had it. And so you can imagine the frustration of having to do the scenes over to fit the other guy's methodology. But it was magic once they put it together. And then you had Christina Hendricks, who was always on the money. And she came in, she was ready. As James said, they had to kick their game up when she showed up. And that's true. They did, because she was phenomenal. And I was so impressed with all of them in their own way of going about creating those characters. But Christina, in some ways, I think, impressed me the most, just because she was so dedicated. And she learned the accent so well that when I first met her, I was with my niece, and we're both from East Texas. And we thought she was a Southerner. And she said, I'm just in character. Now, she was born in Tennessee, but she didn't live there that long. But I can't say too much good about her skills as an actress and her dedication. But it was wonderful being on set with all those people. Bill Sage, who's a good friend, Neil Sandilands and Jeff Pope, and everybody involved was just fantastic. The director, Jim Mickle, and Nick D'Amici is a very close friend. He wrote a large number of them, and appeared in the last season as the devil, which fits, And but I remember in the first season, he rescued a little dog that people had mistreated, and it was covered in fleas, and he just took it away from them. And he, had it cleaned and taken care of, and had his shots, and he still got that dog. Buddy is I don't know what it is, a little mixed dog, but you get to know these people, and things about their character and about them that's outside of the TV show, And I think people forget that sometimes when they see shows, especially when they embody the characters so phenomenally well, that they're individuals, that these are people that have their own lives, And like James he brought his wife on, and his daughter. So, that was all very, very human. And then when they'd walk on the set, they were Hap and Leonard. And it was interesting to see. I see Hap and Leonard different, and I always will, because I created them. But there's an alternate universe in which James and Michael are Hap and Leonard.
Right. That's exactly right. It is an alternate universe. It's like, in one instance, there's Hap and Leonard, which is like both sides of you. In another universe, there's the James Michael version. And in another universe, there's the version that I created as a kid in my mind. And then they all sort of merge and change as, the characters change.
A funny thing is that my son Keith was on the set some too, and James was trying to get my accent down. I remember I said, "Man, you're going to put your eye out. You're just going to have to find something in the middle," which is what he did. But when my son was on the set, he said, "Dad, I just had the strangest thing happen." I said, "What?" He said, "I just saw James for the first time as Hap, and he come walking around the side of the house. He walks just like you, and he actually looks like you when you were younger." And and weirdly, if you look at old pictures, you can kind of see it. You wouldn't think it. I'm sort of like his ugly cousin, really. But it was kind of interesting because he embodied so much of me and of the fictional character that it was a little bit creepy sometimes. And in the best way, I remember he and I were sitting together on a bench, and Lowell Northrop went by, and he went, "Oh, I can see it. The younger, the older Hap." Yeah,
And
I'm gonna
Lowell
kill
was
him.
invited
But
to go
anyway,
opposite.
yeah, Lowell, let's go out back, man. Come on.
Kasey, I have one question, then I want to ask Sadie a question. So for you, Kasey, you and Keith, when you were growing up, your dad's a writer, your mom's involved with that creative world too. And I'm wondering, from a kid's point of view, just going back to when we had Richard Chismar on, we were talking about how same thing with him. His kids are growing up with a father who is he's a writer, and he's dealing with writers all the time. So I didn't deal with that. My family was like, middle class workers. They still encourage the creativity, but they weren't engulfed in it like you guys. So I'm wondering if you think that perhaps gave you a much more opportune moment to find yourself, because you find yourself over and over again as you grow. So I'm wondering if that really helped you blossom into who you became.
Okay, short answer, yes. But I don't know that, it's interesting because I get all the time, what was it like growing up? And it was, I was my mom and my dad. Like, it wasn't anything that, like, we weren't, burning goats out in the backyard or something. I don't know what people are thinking we're doing, but it was normal. It was normal stuff. I had a brother. I had
one sacrifice a year, just one.
It's interesting because I didn't actually realize that I had a different kind of life until I got older. I knew that most of my friends' parents went to work away from the home, and I knew that my parents worked from home, but I never really understood what all of that entailed. I never really understood what those opportunities were that stemmed from that until I got older. So the growing up process, it just was, I didn't question it. It existed as it was. Now, as I look back, I definitely see that having the encouragement and the freedom to choose things that were creative were definitely because of that environment. And I remember when I was in, whatever year it was, when I was in high school, I was in college. So when I went to college, I was older than college, but I think it was my junior year. So I was almost done. And then I was supposed to go on tour. And I basically called my parents and I was like, well, I can't be on tour and be in college at the same time. And my major was social work at the time. And which is, there's an element there that is still who I am, but that is not what I wanted to do. And my parents were like, all right, well, then I guess you better hit the road, and I don't think it ever occurred to me that was a non-standard answer. I was just like, all right, I let them know, and here I go. So, and then I've toured all over the world, and I've had a very interesting life because of that, those opportunities. But these weren't things that I put a lot of thought into of like, should I do this? Should I not? It was just like, I want to do this thing that feels right. Everybody seems okay with it. So I'm going to go for it. So I didn't question, you don't question, especially when you're younger, you're like, everything's fine. Let's do it. So now that, you get older and then you start second guessing and you start going like, well, maybe these things. So I'm glad it all happened that way because I didn't have enough sense to question it. I was just like, all right, that's what you do. You want to do this thing, you go do this thing. That's what they do. And it worked out. So I guess I'll do it,
That's really cool. That social work. My wife.
Yeah, we ruined your life right then.
Yeah.
Is your wife a social worker? Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, she got her master's, and then she had to wait for the first half of whenever the pandemic started with 2020. She had to wait to get her certificate. So that was fun.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? Bless her, because all it took was learning more about what I realized I can help people in ways that are not going to be as emotionally gutting for me. And I'm a very, very sensitive person. And those moments were very important for me to sort of understand that I'm going to have to find another way to help. I am not a boots on the ground in that scenario. So my absolute hats off, respect to her, because I know that's not an easy thing to do.
I don't know how she does it. It's I couldn't do it. Sadie, your mom is a big reader too. So kind of the same question for you, because I listened to an older episode a while ago on This Is Horror with you, and you talked about that. So I'm wondering, with your mom being such a big reader, obviously that had an impact on you with what you do for a living, but what do you think that did for, like, was she always a reader? What did that do to you ultimately as a person, and how it kind of trickles down to you being a mom?
Yeah. So my mom had me when she was 18. And she dropped out of school to raise me. She wasn't with my bio dad for very long. So she was a single mom, raising this big old baby, because I've seen baby pictures of myself and I'm like more than half of her body. And I'm 6 feet tall and she's like 5'5". So she always had books all around, and I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. I still kind of snuck things that I thought were too grown up or adult for me, and didn't tell her that I was reading them, but she soon caught on that I was reading her Stephen King. And my parents are very like youthful and kind of young at heart. So I would listen to cool music and they would pick up what I was listening to and I would listen to what they were listening to. And then with books, like now, it's so funny. It's almost like a competition. Like my dad will call me and be like, I picked up a signed edition of Freezer Burn. I found it on eBay. It was only like $35. And he showed me a picture. And I was like, Dad, wow, check this out. And I showed him a picture of mine and they're the same. And he's like, that's the picture I just showed you. I'm like, no, Dad, that's mine. He's like, no, that's mine. That's my signed copy. I'm like, no, this is my copy. We have the same copy. Like, it wasn't the flex he thought it was going to be. And he was so put out by it.
Plus, this is, I don't know if you're going to brag about this. Stephen King follows you. I know he does with you too, Joe, but that's an obvious reason. Like, Sadie, I want to say jealous. I don't care how that sounds. I am jealous because that is so cool. So that is the biggest flex in the world for someone like us.
So again, I was with my parents when this happened. Okay. So pandemic had happened. We were finally able to like go see people in 2021. It was still very nerve-wracking. We drove there instead of flew. I wanted to hang out with my mom and dad. Like, it was the first time I'd seen them in like over a year and a half, whatever. We get to their house and we're just chilling and hanging out. Dan and I slept in the guest room. In the morning, Dan went to go see his parents and I got in bed with my mom so that my dad could make us breakfast in bed. And so we're just chilling in there, hanging out. I like had taken a picture of my mom's bookcases of her Stephen King collection because hers rivals my own. And I was like, ooh, look at my mom's OG Stephen King collection. And I tagged Stephen King. About 10 minutes later, after we're like just talking and whatever, I pull up my phone and it said that Stephen King followed me. And I like pause for a second. I'm like, that's a fake account. I clicked on it. It was his fucking account. I was like, Mom, and I just like burst into tears. And she's like, who died? I was like, Mom, Stephen King is following me. And we both started crying. It was so dorky, but like also really cool.
That's awesome.
Mom, I made it.
That's fantastic.
I still to this day, like the other day, I got a haircut. And I posted it on Twitter and he retweeted it.
Oh, that's awesome.
My hair.
All right,
Yeah.
Wild.
That was
Totally
You
wild.
know, one thing about Stephen King too is when our dog died, we were pretty upset about it, and he
Aw.
sent condolences, and I thought that was sweet of him, you know. And his
Aw.
boys are just great guys. I started to say kids; they're not kids, but they seem like kids to me because they're in the general age group as our two. I think
Aw.
they're just a little bit older, yeah. And it was that was very sweet of him, you know.
Absolutely.
I think he's a good guy. I don't know him, you know, extremely well. I actually know his kids a little better, you know, but his two boys anyway. So, but yeah, good guy.
I mean, he doesn't have to have a Twitter, and he constantly promotes people, new voices that's really
I think
neat.
my favorite thing is that picture that Shady, I saw it, that you reshared it, and it's him with his Ukraine, and he's in front of the books, and he's just like, meh. It's like, okay, if that's not doing it, then I don't know what will, because like he's bringing all of the, the enthusiasm for everything. It just, I don't know, he's great, and I think he uses his platform for such good things. It's nice to see.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, just like props to Joe too. Like, I think it's really cool that you encourage people on social media, and like you'll see. I'll just, because I have you on notification, so anytime you talk to anybody, I see it. It's kind of stalkery, but there it is. But I'll see you like encouraging people. They'll be struggling with writing or having writer's block, or saying like, oh, I feel like I can't please anyone, like I don't know if anyone will like my story. And you're always just like, write what you want to write, like you have these like little nuggets of wisdom, which I think it's so cool that you and Stephen King and others like use your platforms to encourage other writers. It's really cool.
Well, thank you. It's because I remember how hard it was for me to get going. And, even now you have moments when Kasey and I were discussing that today. I mean, I'm going like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm interested in so many damn things. That's my problem. I never had like, I'm just going to be a horror writer. I'm just going to be a crime writer. I'm just going to be a Western writer. I'm just going to be a historical, whatever it is, science fiction writer. So I've always done everything, which has been both good. It's both my blessing and my curse, because if you're known for one thing, you're more likely to even become more well known. And, but at some point, I just don't think I need that. I just don't need more than that. And, if you can't please everybody, you don't feel this weight of people looking over your shoulder. You're creating for yourself. And, and no matter how certain you are, how much you strength you have about things like that, of course you have doubts that come into your mind. But I've always been able to say, you know what, I'm me. And I'm not very good at being anybody else, but I can be me. And so I'm going to be me.
Well, even no matter what genre you're writing, your fingerprints are all over it anyway. So like what I listened to that short story, The Pit, which is like super like just, it's just so brutal and just, but even in that middle of all of that brutality, there's heart and there's characterization. It's vastly different than like The Thicket or The Bottoms, like whether you're writing children or whether you're writing adults, like your flavor is still there. Your fingerprints are still in it, no matter what it is.
You know what? We can absolutely come back.
Thank you. I one time I had talked about, it might be fun to, I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh no, there is a lag. So I didn't think anyone was talking, but please continue.
I was just going to say one time my agent and I were talking, and I thought it'd be fun. And, I've considered doing like a pen name novel. And it's like everybody says, well, yeah, like in one page, they know who it is. So what's the point? And I thought, yeah, that's probably true.
That would be true.
The Bachman curse.
Yeah.
You know what, Sadie, I thought you brought up such a good point that, Joe uses social media, among other reasons to encourage newer writers. I know you jumped in on a conversation pretty recently about, I'm paraphrasing, but reviews being for readers and, being legitimate in their honesty. So, Joe, I'm curious because you, like a lot of newer writers, you don't need to be on Twitter to sell books. So what's your approach to social media?
Well, yeah, you do need to be on Twitter to sell books. You need to be on everything to keep selling books. I mean, I'm going to sell a certain amount, that's for sure. But the thing is that you want to be available to people. And when you are a writer that does a lot, then you want people to be aware of where you are. Because one of the things early in my career is people, they didn't know about everything because it wasn't on the internet. There was none of that. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. And so I think it's a marvelous tool for promoting your work. But I also think that it has a side benefit of, Sadie's mentioned that, is being able to communicate with people. And I've always had this feeling that I have empathy for other people going through those things because I went through them. And I understand how disappointing it is and how hard it is. And, I'm a blue collar guy, even though I've been writing now for the largest part of my life. I came from a blue collar background, and I plowed with mules, literally, and I worked in Rosefield. Started to say cotton fields. I actually picked cotton once, and I did a variety of different, kinds of field work, aluminum chair factory, all that stuff. So I have respect for all of that. But when I was growing up, that's not what I wanted. I don't really think there are many people that say, what I want to do? I want to work in an aluminum chair factory when I grow up. I don't really believe that's true. And even though I have respect for anybody doing honest work, I wanted something else. And, my father couldn't read or write. He was illiterate. And my mother had an 11th grade education. She was a great reader. I mean, until just recently, I read 3 or 4 books every week. Yeah, and of course, I have a little more time because I'm a full-time writer, but I also have, martial arts. I have other things going on in my life. So it's a dedication. I was lucky in that I could read quickly and retain. So when I was a kid, to get away from this, and as a young man, to get away from this kind of tedious lifestyle, I spent a lot of time reading and a lot of time writing, but I also spent a lot of time living. And I think the problem I have sometimes with newer writers is all the books have the stink of the library on them. You want to have something about yourself and something about life's experiences to go with that from what you've learned on how to handle style and how to handle characterization, et cetera, but and how to tell a good story. But if you can put something of your own life, or if you've paid attention to other people's lives, it doesn't feel like it's just all books being books. It's sort of like some movies that are all, they reference other movies constantly. There's some well-known movie makers who do that a lot. And I'm not nearly as excited about a lot of their work as I am others, where I feel like I've got this rare and unusual and personal voice. So all of that comes out of, that kind of background. But yet what it really gives me is that connection, I think, to people who might be struggling or might be at a point where they're discouraged, or, I only get discouraged like for a few minutes. I was always like mad. If I couldn't sell something, I was mad. And so I just worked harder. And I used to work a lot more hours, but really for 25 years or so, maybe 30, I do about 3 hours a day. And that works for me, but it's a dedicated 3 hours. By the time most people get up, I'm finished. And I find that
that is true. I get text at 4 a.m. I'm like, what is he doing?
Wait, what time do you start at?
Well, I don't have a set time, but it's anywhere from 4 to 6. I get up and I go to work, and whatever that is, it's usually about 3 hours. Today I did 2.5 on a screenplay I'm working on, but I thought I was marvelous today, so I gave myself a half hour off. And so, and when you're doing it, you can just you have these days when you think, man, nobody's this good, and then you read it the next day and you go, oh, that's not so good. And you have to have that push and pull where you're convinced you're doing something really well. And then when you're aware of the fact you're not doing it nearly as well as you thought you were, or as well as you would like to do. So there's this constant push and pull, just like in martial arts, like jujitsu. If they push, you pull. If they pull, you push. And it's kind of that way in writing. You have to be excited about what you do, and you have to be wondering what you think about it, not what other people do.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone want to chime in?
I get up at 4 a.m. too.
Yay!
Yay! I go to bed really early, but I do wake up early. I do my best work in the morning. I'm too tired at night to do anything.
I get that. And
yeah.
I get up an hour. I can only do an hour. Maybe when my son doesn't wake me up 2 or 3 hours before work, I can try working that out. But Joe, I was curious, man. Beta readers. I've never heard you talk about this, so I'm wondering: have you ever had beta readers? Do you still, if you had, do you still use them? What are your comments on that?
No, I don't use them. I don't, because I don't care what they think. When I was, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't. That doesn't mean I don't, I just don't, I haven't got time for that crap. the when I was younger, I had friends that I gave things to read, but that's just because I wanted to share them with somebody because they weren't out there to be read. They were in manuscript form. And I had some people who were, would read them and offer some suggestions that were helpful, but I really don't like that. Because I feel like you can be so easily influenced. Something that and here's the thing about writing is when you're writing, there's always something in your writing that you're questioning. And it may be that a person or a reviewer will pick up on that, and that can be good, but it can also make you so focused on that flaw that you may not realize that for most people, it may go unnoticed. That doesn't mean you want to not do it better, but it means that the next person reads it and they like that exact thing that the other person hates. So you can, it's like reviews. People get worked up about reviews, but I don't, because I feel like unless somebody comes out and says you're a bad person and quit screwing ducks or something like that, then I'm not, I'm not bothered by it. If I got nothing but bad reviews, I would, but I always look at it. If it's an honest review, it's an honest opinion. And if you believe the good ones, you got to believe the bad ones. So absolutely. I always look at the good ones as tools, and those I promote, not because I necessarily always think they're correct, but because I know they're tools. And a bad review is not a good tool. It's a blunt instrument. But it as far as like thinking, oh, this guy's bad, or my little heart's broke, or I can't write. I'm not like that at all. I think my daughter gets madder than anybody when I get a review
I gotta tell you, I'm ready to fist fight anybody that I don't like what they said about, like, even if it's something gentle, I'm like, all right, I guess we gotta go.
Isn't that an East Texas thing?
I know.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm ready to scrap. And Dad's like, calm down, calm down.
This is a great time to bring up fender lizards. I really like that. I have no bad words to say about it, not because I'm terrified of Kasey now, but seriously, it was awesome because one, she narrated it. Two, it's a good story. And I could have believed you, Kasey, that voice matched the character. So I'd love to know how you guys came about that, you narrating that book.
Okay. So what I will say is Dot is me if I were raised of different circumstance. and so I definitely, I think that reading for that book was perfect because I felt very connected to her. I felt very much like with a sliding doors moment, I could have very much been Dot. And so there were so many things that were stories of Dad's childhood, in some ways my childhood, also some things about what my grandfather had told my father, and those things had trickled in. And I mean, the scene, as we're talking about violence, the scene where she takes the 2x4 or whatever it is, and then just knocks that guy that's been beating on her sister. I know that as my grandfather telling my father, "Well, get you a 2x4," and like, because apparently somebody was picking on Dad as a kid. And, this is a man who was born in 1909. So he was like, this is the
perspective.
Yeah. So I hear those stories. And so it's ingrained in my soul of things that are of my family of different times, or stories that we've heard, or other parts of our family that are a little more suspect, if you will. And I don't even remember how I got the actual job of it. I don't know if that was a dad recommendation or if it was one.
No, it was just fortunate.
Yeah, I've done a couple, and I know that one or two of them Dad's actually recommended, but the others, I think people just have reached out because before pandemic, I also did a lot of singing and voice work as an actor. And you might hear my dog back there squeaking his toy, forgive me. So people knew that I worked in a vocal space. And so I think that when this came about, it might have been that Stefan, oh, you know what? I know what it was. Not that you care, but now we're there. So I went to World Horror at one point, and I met Stefan, who worked with that company, Skyboat or Steamboat, and forgive me for not remembering, but we had talked and we were talking about other titles. So when they actually ended up with Fender Lizards to record, he and I had already exchanged emails about another project. And so he said, well, do you want to come in and read for this? And it was great. And then the funny thing is the girl who was running the soundboard, Cassandra, who was excellent, turned out she was the daughter of the guy who owned the company. So it was just a really nice camaraderie. It was a really nice confluence of things. And I think she and I had a really good working relationship. And so, because you can sit there and read, but it's really helpful to have that person who's listening, who's sort of making sure that you're following that rhythm. So she was great. And I felt like the rhythm came naturally. And as I was sort of learning, I'm not a voice actor. That's a very different skill set. That is not my skill set. I can't do, sorry for the squeaks. I can't do accents. I can't do voices in that way. Thanks, Leo. It's really helpful.
I'm not cutting that out. By
So
the way.
Leo, on the other hand, extremely talented. And so, I just sort of decided that I wasn't going to try to come in and do all these voices. I was going to read the story like a storyteller and try to inhabit them a little bit. So,
yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's just been fun. And I've always enjoyed reading the work. And that's one that is probably more the kind of thing I would gravitate to as a reader initially. And it just sort of happened, and I love doing them. I hope that I can do more.
Didn't George Martin give you your first job?
Yeah, actually, that's what happened with it. Is when I moved to LA, Dad took me out here and we did this epic road trip, and we stopped in Santa Fe and we saw George, and we just were talking, and that was it. And I guess he liked the accent or appreciated the accent that was there. I don't know if he liked it. And so when he was doing, what was it? I can't remember. It was Ed Bryant. Yeah, but I don't remember what the wild cards. He was doing a collection there, and they needed a Cajun reader. And so they called me and said, can you be Cajun? And I was like, sure, I can be Cajun. And so, and at the time, like, I don't know, I had no concept of what this was. I was just like, it's a job. Sure. George asked me to do it. I'll do it. And then I get there, and it turns out that there's like Aboriginal accents, Australian accents, Cajun accents, all of these different things that I was not ready for. And bless the man who walked me.
You did them though.
I did it. And you know what? I think it turned out fine, but it was my very first time doing it. And I'd like to go in now with a better understanding, but I think
you did some voice acting. You said you didn't do any voice acting, but you did some for Stan Lee.
Yeah, but I did a Texas lady, and I did it's like, I'm
yeah,
not
but you did
coming in.
You did two different voices.
I did a Texas mother and a Texas
That's
daughter.
true.
But these are not skilled.
Yeah.
I'm not coming in with my British accent,
Yeah, right.
So I can't get past one thing. Joe, are you friends with George R.R. Martin? Because I never knew that.
Yeah, I've known George since the late 70s. We're in fact, I'm writing I wrote a screenplay for him not long ago, short that's being done. Vincent D'Onofrio starred in it and directed it. And I think they're about done with all of the special effects. And I'm not exactly sure how George intends to put it out there. I don't know if he's going to do festivals or if it's going to be added to some other adaptations of Howard Waldrop's work, because that's what it is. It's called Night of the Cooters, and it's a story that he wrote about Mars invading West Texas back in the early 1900s. And it's a lot of fun, and I think my script's a lot of fun, and I got to go watch them do it. We had to wear a mask and take tests and every day, and it was worth it. And it was nice visiting with Vincent, and because he was in one of my favorite movies of all time, The Whole Wide World, which is based on Robert E. Howard's life. And Renee Zellweger's first real movie. I think that was her first real movie. If you ever get a chance to look up The Whole Wide World, you should. And especially if you have an interest in writers like Robert E. Howard. I guess I was attracted to it because he too was a Texas writer. Now he was a Central West Texas writer, so where he came from was very different. People always want to assume I live in the desert, and I live in the woods and swamps, and it's more like Louisiana. But Bob Howard lived in the ugliest place you could ever imagine. In fact, Cross Plains is so ugly that when they filmed it around Austin because they were just so ugly. You put it on the camera and you go, oh man, I'm depressed. No wonder he shot himself. And they filmed, but it's one of my favorite films. And Vincent D'Onofrio played Robert E. Howard just beautifully. And it was great to talk to him about that because it's based on a book by Noveline Price, who was, I guess, sort of his girlfriend would be the term back then, because I think that it was like almost girlfriend situation. But it's a tragedy, and yet it's a joy. It's a beautiful film. It is extremely well acted. The script's terrific. And so it was great to get a chance to work with Vincent D'Onofrio. And I just feel like I was very fortunate. And I'm doing a full length screenplay right now. So that's next. I've done a bunch of them. Used to write for Batman, the animated series, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But so it was fun for me to do this, which is a combination of animation and real actors, and The Night of the Cooters.
Batman.
Yes, I wrote that too. Yeah.
Say, name on
I
it.
did
George
Batman
Lansdale.
on TV. Yeah, I did it on TV for the animated series. Did that. I did a book called Captured by the Engines, Engines, and which was Batman. And I did a movie. What's it called? Son of Batman, which is a full-length animated film. So I've been in the Batcave, man.
Yeah, man. That's really neat. Yeah, we talked about that last time you were on. There is one thing that I would like to pick your brain on, then Brand, Sadie, Kasey, whoever, jump in, please. So with George R.R. Martin, I'm wondering say pass if you want, but have you had the conversation with him? Because he went from, rising, his series was going up. With the other books before that, they were doing pretty well. Then one of his books, the fourth or fifth one, almost ruined his career. And then obviously with Game of Thrones, it put him on a level where he is probably well known throughout the world. I gotta imagine the pressure that comes with that is pretty much you can't comprehend that. Have you had that conversation with them? And the second follow-up question is probably an obvious one. What would you do if you were in his shoes with that kind of like microscopic focus on you from readers that it could be anyone. It could be the guy down the street or someone in Zimbabwe. It doesn't matter.
The only thing he ever said to me is, I can't believe it's been a decade that I've been working on this book, but he's a marvelous guy. I think a lot of George as a human being, and I've just seen him do so many kind things. And that's all I will say is that George is my friend, and I stand by him. He's a sweetheart. I mean, when I went out there for this, he brought me out for this filming that I was telling you about, the short film, and he put us up in his guest house, and then he would, he'd get Mexican food and bring it over to us at night after we'd got through, being on set all day. And we just talked about the stuff we always talked about. When we first started, we joked once that, we were like talking, oh my God, George was saying they're paying like $300 now for a short story at Amazing Stories. And we were like, oh, wow, we got to do that. I never did sell to Amazing Stories, but it was stuff like that. I remember, going to AggieCon and those guys be up there. He may have slept on the couches up there. I remember that he was doing the best he could just to get by, like all of us were. And we all had different experiences in our lives and careers. I would say both of us got the careers we wanted. He got a different career, and he certainly got a richer career and a more broadly known, but I got the career I wanted, and I think he got the one he wanted. And you mentioned his books. My favorite book's the one that where he always says I couldn't get another book published for 20 years. Armageddon Rag. I love Armageddon Rag.
Yeah.
And the one about the
vampire one in New Orleans.
Steamboat,
Yeah, Fever Dream.
There it is.
Yeah, Fever Dream. Yeah, those are my favorite books of his. And so I think people are missing, because he once told me, he said, "Yeah, everybody wants Game of Thrones. They don't want those." And I'm always like, "Wow, not Armageddon Rag and Fever Dream. Those are fantastic." And he did so many great short stories and George has always been a slow writer too. That's what a lot of people don't realize. And he had been working on those Game of Thrones books for a long time when they, first popped up. I'm guilty in that I had all the first editions and I actually gave them away bought new editions. I still wish I'd have kept the first edition because I bought the new ones and had George sign those, And And then all my other books, I was looking through them the other day, and they're all books he had signed when we see each other at different things. And I thought, well, I should have kept those first editions. I'd made some money off that boy.
Now, I just got one comment, and Brennan brought up social media. That's the crazy thing about it. Like in this field, any entertainment field, it's weird. It's like, it's not like any other job in the world in the sense that everyone feels entitled, not everyone, people, strangers, they feel entitled to kind of say whatever they want to people they've never met before. Like I'm sure I know you've experienced it, Joe. I've seen it from random people about your books or how you deal with your money, with your family. It's incredibly rude and intrusive, but I don't know where I'm going with this, so Brennan, jump in and save me. But it's a weird time because you get to talk to anyone you want and connect with them, but at the same time, you got Joe Schmo over here saying, "Hey, this book sucks. Write this book." Do you have any comments on that, Joe? I don't know where I'm going with this, man.
Most of the people that I know that comment are always sweet, and they're most of them are very, very kind, and I'm proud to have them read the books, and that they put beans on my table, and I love doing it. I mean, how lucky am I to get to do exactly what I wanted to do when I was 4 years old? I didn't know it was a career, but I wanted to tell stories, and I got to do that. So every once in a while, I've had a couple of stalkers, and then I've had like one guy that writes me weird letters about come rescue him. He's obviously got some mental and emotional problems.
Yeah.
And you get some of that, but most of the time it's been all right. I think Italy is one of the more interesting ones. Italy, I'm extremely popular in Italy. I mean, I'm kind of like a superstar over there. People recognize me on the street and stuff.
Wow.
And that's fun for about a week, but then after a little while, I can imagine what George goes through daily, constantly, because I get a little dose of it and I go, okay, that's great. I get to feel like I'm a big dog for a week, but after that, I want to be a small dog again. I want to go home and do my thing. And, I'll be someplace that I'd never imagined and people will recognize me. And I go, how is that possible? That anybody would recognize me anywhere, but not like those guys. Not like George and Steven and people like that. And, and I mean it when I say I don't want that. I want enough attention and enough financial reward to keep doing it. But I always think about people like superstars, in film and stuff like that. Gosh, that must be miserable. I mean, parts of it is great. It's kind of that constant, hey, people recognize me. That's cool. And then it's like, who the hell is that? And the weirdest thing that I think I've had happen was in Italy where a woman clutched my crotch. But that is perhaps the weirdest thing. And that was when I was with Lou Shiner and we were doing a tour over there, and they thought it was funny. And you know what? So did I. I understand people that would think, oh my God, you've been violated. But I just thought it was funny. I didn't want it to happen again. I thought, okay, that's enough.
Disclosure, don't grab Joe's crotch.
But I have no idea why that was. And it was obviously planned between these two women, but I have no idea why that came about. I think they challenged each other. They got to thinking, maybe they think they'd had a lot of wine and they challenged each other. And then one of them did it, So.
Wow.
Well, yeah,
Sadie violated my space.
I mean, Sadie and I were talking, have been talking a lot, and it is interesting. I mean, Sadie, I think more than anybody has been dealing in that space and sort of, I mean, you get to see everybody.
Oh, I bet.
You see the author side, you see the people interacting. I mean, you see the good, the bad, the ugly. So, I mean, I feel like if anybody has a take on it, it's you more than any of us.
I mean, I'm so thankful for social media because I've gotten to meet heroes, that way. I get to talk to Joe. I mean, I might have played it cool, like talking to you on the phone, but then like after we hung up, I was like, oh my God, what life am I living? Like, honestly, like I was looking at my phone and it's insane. So without social media affording me all of these different opportunities, like I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have a career. And it's kind of like, you know, you just have to learn how to use it wisely, and you just kind of learn through making mistakes. And with the business, like I have to use
Right.
it for the business, but you know, you start learning how to formulate boundaries. You start learning how to have like a circle of trust of like people that you can let in and kind of like talk to about things that you're like experiencing, and so that you don't go and shit post on Twitter and then say something that you regret. So you just go and find those friends that you can kind of just be like, oh, I hate this, that I saw that, blah, blah, blah. But like we as human beings, we are not designed to have like 10,000 people barking at something that we did. Like that's unnatural. Okay. Anyone's going to have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Stephen King posting that picture of himself in a t-shirt and his socks, like he probably had no idea 600,000 people were going to have an opinion about that. You know, he probably turned the notifications off in 5 minutes. Like that's a lot, you know?
Oh yeah, we
I think
had
he gets to do what he wants.
Right.
when we talked to Bev Vincent, he kind of said when Steven tags him, what was it, Brennan? He said he turns him off because he gets a minute.
You'd have to. You'd have to.
Yeah, it's unreal.
But you know, the one, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to blabber on about something not as funny or whatever as you are. So please save me, Joe.
No, it wasn't funny. It's just, I have a little delay sometimes, so I don't mean to step on people's toes. I apologize for that.
I gotta be honest,
But,
I'm surprised your internet's working.
Yeah, I live out in the woods.
He's out in the middle of the
yeah.
woods. It's
with the coyotes, and or like we say around here is coyotes. But
Coyotes.
Nice. Damn, I forgot what I was going to say. That was how good that's. No, I was going to say this. I've seen on the Twitter, you'd be on it, and sometimes there's the trolls. They're always waiting to turn something that a lot of people, including me a few times, something that you say innocently or humorously, and you're really talking to somebody you already know on Twitter,
Right.
and someone will find that, and this is like a personal thing. It's out there for everybody to see, but it's to be obvious because of the way it's set up that you're talking to somebody that you're joking with or friendly with, or you should be able to say, well, it's a joke, and they understand, and they're like innocuous jokes. They're nothing weird. They're just silly things that people will latch onto. And I've seen a lot of women. I think I've seen this with Sadie too, where you have men that act like idiots, and it's embarrassing to the species, to be honest. I've seen that a few times, and I think they don't know her, and what are they saying about her? Why are they saying this?
Mhm.
And I think what I'm talking about. I'm sure and I've seen so many women that say something, and you got to have some guy come back and always sexualize it in some way. And sex is part of life, but it shouldn't be every part of your life.
Right.
And it shouldn't be something that you inflict on other people in that manner. And I've seen that a lot. I think that's probably the thing I've seen the most that I think's ugly about Twitter and probably Facebook and what have you. But overall, I think that it's a pretty good tool. But I'll be honest with you, if I weren't selling books on it and I didn't have people that I liked and admired, like Sadie or whatever, I wouldn't be on it. I really wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadie, tell me to cut this if you want, but there was one thing that I was talking with Brennan with privately, because we couldn't get over this, where Stephen King asked her a question and people jumped in and answered it. And I'm thinking, if I'm on a street and two people are talking, I'm not going to say, let me answer for person A. It's unreal.
Yeah. So like Stephen King does not step out on Twitter hardly at all. He'll tweet something and he'll interact with people like on his own turf, but he doesn't really step out and comment on people's. That's like why Joe said it was really cool that Stephen King talked to him about the loss of his dog, and he'll step out once in a while. But I just thought it was cool that I was having an A and B conversation with some author about classic horror movie, classic horror movies that he should watch. And I was like, oh, you should definitely watch The Thing. And then Stephen King like steps in and is like, oh, well, what version did you watch? And
Yeah.
so he's talking to me, which he never does. And I was like, okay, I have to like be cool and think about what I'm gonna say. So I collect myself, I type out this response. Like in the time that it took me to do that, which wasn't long, like seconds, I type it out, hit send, and like 4 or 5 guys had answered the question for me. And I was like, are you fucking kidding? Like my daughter was sitting right next to me and I had a sweatshirt on. I like pulled my sweatshirt over my head, the hoodie, and I like pulled the strings and was just like, like, why are men? Like, you didn't see a woman step in there and say shit to him. It was these fucking guys who are like, oh, excuse me, lady, I'm gonna talk for you now.
Excuse me, mother whore. Let me field this one for you.
I wish we were at a con and that would have happened, because no, that would not have happened.
Well, I always
okay,
get nervous.
Sadie, which version was it? Which
Yeah.
version was it?
Of course it was the 1980s version with Kurt Russell. Like, of course.
I like the old one and that one too. I like them both. I think they're both wonderful.
Yeah,
You know,
I just like,
that's one, two of them. Those are great movies, aren't
they're
they?
great. But I mean,
But he asked you.
he did. He was talking to me, and like, you know, Stephen King just walks off because it's like he can't even turn around like this and talk to anyone without everyone being like, la, 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 you know? Annoying.
That's George too. He has the
Yeah.
same thing. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, when I was talking about that earlier, is that we were like at IHOP here in Nacogdoches, and people were, you know, and you know, if it'd been me, they come over, hey, that's pretty cool, you know, but I'm not getting it all the time like he is. And I know he was exhausted. He was always kind. He was always sweet, but you know, he can't even go to the IHOP in Nacogdoches, Texas without being spotted.
But I'm
Bill
gonna,
Paxton
to be
was
fair,
the same. Bill was a sweetheart too.
to be fair, they're
Bill and I
at the
was
IHOP
we
in
were at the same
Nacogdoches.
IHOP.
That's, I mean, if for Nacogdoches,
Well,
that's
yeah, but you think
earth-shattering.
nobody would. Well, okay, that's another way of looking at it. But that's like Bill Paxton had his hat and had his glasses and, you know, sunglasses, but people recognized him. And of course, he was a sweetheart, and because he always was, you know. But you think about those people and the kind of fame they have and the recognition they have. It's got to be cool in one way, but it's got to be exhausting in another, you know.
Joe, how much time we got left with you, man?
With me?
Yeah, well, the last 2 times we had you on, I wasn't keeping track of time, and I want to make sure I get everything in.
Oh, I'm cool. I mean, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So want to cover Born for Trouble a little bit more. Let's start with the creator. Joe, how can you, I don't want to spoil anything. Tell us anything you want about it. And then anyone else, please.
What I would say is that these are stories that have been written over the years about Hap and Leonard, and they're like, I think of them like the cartoons between the bigger novels. They're kind of the moment where I can touch on it without having to be quite as involved with it, because I just have this one little story I want to tell, and it doesn't warrant a novel. And it's a way to play with different ideas. One of the things I've always done with Hap and Leonard is I've tried to make sure that they're always the same, but the novels I did, like a caper novel with Savage Season. I did the bad, you know, neighborhood novel with Mucho Mojo. Two Bear Mambo's the bad town, and Bad Chili. I don't know what the hell that is. That's got a lot of stuff. But what I did was every one of them was I tried to do a different, with Elephant of Surprise, I tried to do a momentum novel or a chase novel or a pure thriller novel. I've always experimented with them, and I've never felt obligated to do any one kind of book. You know, Vanilla Ride, I think, is like more of a slick sort of, I guess it's more in the pop vein in a way. I don't know how else to describe it really. But I mean, I've always tried to play around with it. So in this collection with all these short stories, that's what you see me doing. Is each one of them is a little different from the other, and each one of them takes a little different tack than the other one. And I had a great time writing them individually, but they were written over a period of time. You know, they're not new, but they've never been collected before. The most recent one I did for Ann Perry for a mystery anthology, and that one's called Sad Onions, and that's a short story, but that's the most recent one. But it was it was a chance to play with different approaches to suspense and crime.
Very cool. Brennan, Sadie, Kasey, anything that you guys want to talk about with this book?
I mean, not specifically with that book because I'm not there yet, but I mean, just in terms of trying to tell people like the importance of, I don't know, like getting immersed in an author's whole body of work, like back to back, and just, you know, like when you read an author's back catalog, like you might read like recent releases, like Joe just put out Moon Lake or, you know, something like that nature, but then to go back and to hear their voice over the period of time that they've been writing is just so, it's like a whole experience. You know, to start a journey with Hap and Leonard, like way back here in the first book, and then to take it all the way to the last book. I mean, I kind of don't want that to end. You know, they're kind of like fictional friends that you store in your heart and you kind of feel like you know them. And so I'm glad that it's like a really large body of work, and then I can work through some of the short stories and stuff, because those two characters get into some of the weirdest situations. So it's really fun that Joe made little stories and vignettes for them, because they'll just like be sitting on the bed of a truck, like, you know, squirrel shooting or something, and they'll have the funniest conversation. And like he said, it doesn't have to be a whole novel, but I would sure as hell like to read that story.
I only got as far as book 3 for the older ones, and they keep getting better. Not that the first one's anything short of a really great book, but Two Beer Mambo, when I figured out what the title meant, I was like, there's just sense of humor. I don't see that in a whole lot of other authors.
Well, thank you. You know, and a lot of it, people always say, how do you do the humor and stuff? I don't, it just happens. You know, I'm writing, it's kind of the way I think and kind of the way I see things, but I also use the Hap and Leonard novels for social issues and different things like that. And I have them speak how people speak, and I have them speak how people I hear speak, both positively and negatively, because I'm trying to, you know, entertain, but I also want to take that opportunity to, you know, comment on racism and comment on things that I find deplorable or at least concerning, and yet things I also want to, that I might find entertaining. And I think sometimes you have to look at the worst things in an entertaining way. Mark Twain said there's no humor in heaven. And when you think about that, nearly all humor is based on somebody's pain, discomfort, or what have you. And so you know, this was coming from an atheist, you know, Mark Twain. But the idea is that if you really think about it, and you know, somebody falling off a ladder is slapstick. You might not really want somebody to fall off a ladder, but if it didn't kill them and you thought about it later, it might be funny. And I think we're all kind of like that. And in The Thicket, I had a character, Shorty, say, everything in life is funny, but your death, but others will laugh.
I freaking love that book so much. There's like so many times where I was like crying in some parts, and then the next part I'm laughing. Like that definitely is your whole brand, Joe, is just the horror and humor and humanity, a lot of humanity.
Sadie, do you have a favorite if you had to pick one?
You know, it's funny is mine, or who are you talking to? I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
No, that's all right. This is a fun game because I stop sometimes because I don't know if it's gonna be a delay.
No, it's just a delay on my end that makes, you know, every once in a while. No, if I had to pick a favorite of my own, it's Paradise Sky. That's my favorite of all my books. And is it my best? I don't know, but it's my favorite. And I think it's my best. But most people have their own, And it's funny is that I have these other books that I think are far better than the Hap and Leonard's as complete books, but I've never had characters I loved more than Hap and Leonard. And I do think that Blood and Lemonade and of Mice and Minestrone are two of my very best books about in their younger period. And those are my favorite Hap and Leonard books. So which ones do you like the best? It'd be those two, really.
You a big fan of Mice and Men? Is that kind of a knockoff?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I'm a big Steinbeck fan. I'm a Hemingway fan.
Yep.
F. Scott Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, Carson McCullers, all of those writers. And as well as people like Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont and, Henry Kuttner and Cyril Kornbluth. I mean, I could just go on and on and on for all those older writers, be they considered popular fiction or literary fiction. But like Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird's my favorite novel, still is. Huckleberry Finn, my goodness, Mark Twain. I love Mark Twain. There's all of those writers have impacted me and changed me and influenced me. I've always been very open about those influences, and Greek mythology is a big influence, and things like the Iliad and the Odyssey and Jason and the Argonauts, or the Argonautica is what the book's actually called, by I think it's Apollonius of Rhodes, I think is the author of that. But there's all of those particular things, they all come together. And if I have anything about my style that is peculiar at all, I think it's just because I put all that in a blender. And I don't stop and think, am I making this a weird Western? I know it's going to be a weird Western, but I try to let all of that become natural and not have something that's, you got your weird part, you got your Western part. That's not how it's done. Or you got your crime part, you got your science fiction part. It's all supposed to be a blended thing when I'm doing it. Some have more elements of one thing than another, but that all comes from love and passion of all of those writers and wanting to be good yourself and wanting to say, maybe somebody will remember this. And if they don't, I don't have to worry about it because I'll be dead. But, you hope they do.
As far as weird Westerns go, quick plug to Silver Shamrock. You and Ed Lee, I don't know who else is. No other authors, to my knowledge, have been announced yet, are going to be in Silver Shamrock's Midnight. Was it Midnight Beyond? It's not Beyond the Stagecoach.
I think In the Stagecoach.
Yeah, definitely should have written that down. So, Sadie, I was wondering what your favorite Hap and Leonard book is.
Well, I love Savage Season. I love the first one a lot.
It's a good one.
My favorite Lansdale book is this happens to me a lot with a lot of different authors, is the first one that I read is always my favorite. So I was following Joe online, and then I was like, yeah, I'm going to read. I couldn't figure out which one I wanted to read, but I wanted to read The Bottoms because it had child protagonists, which are my favorite. I was blown away. I was calling my mom in the middle of it being like, what, like, you ruined my whole life. Like, why didn't you have any of these books in your house so that I could read this when I was younger? Like, I was so mad at her. And then I made her read it. And then my parents started getting into him. And then we all started fighting over who discovered Joe first. It was me. But The Bottoms is my favorite. And then Edge of Dark Water, because it's also child protagonist. But I love when Joe does kids. His voice for kids is,
I do too.
best.
I like that.
It's my favorite.
What about you, Kasey? I'm curious to know what your favorite Hap and Leonard is.
Let's see. Well, I think Mucho Mojo is probably my favorite. And then I have some sentimental favorites, which I think are the later ones, because I feel more like probably Elephant of Surprise, because I think at that point I feel like I'm really hearing my dad speak. And I feel like the character, because Savage Season actually is one of my least favorites. and so when I read it, but only because I think I read it and I see how unformed Hap and Leonard are. and it's hard for me to go backwards in my brain in that way, because I read it and I was like, oh, he doesn't know what's going on with them. He doesn't know that these guys are going to be here for the next 30 years.
Right.
And I didn't, yeah.
And he didn't. And it's hard for me to go backwards. So Mucho Mojo is probably my favorite. And then, I'm going to say Elephant of Surprise. But you know what? The story of Mice and Minestrone, I think, is one of the best Hap and Leonard stories. And it was in the previous collection. And it's just so sad. It's like, but it's bittersweet and sad, and very much just like reminds me of where I grew up and the people that I grew up around, and the people that like, they just never really had a shot, and you read it and you feel it. And it's probably for that reason, like the emotional favorite of all of them. But it's hard because I like them all for different reasons, and they mean different things to me because they're done at different stages. And it's, there's so much about my family that's entrenched in there. So it's like picking who's your favorite, cousin, it's like, I like them all for different reasons, it's really weird. And I mean, obviously that's a biased answer, but I am biased. So, there you have it.
There's no way, there's no way you or Keith cannot be unbiased in this kind of thing. Like, how can you? You've literally you grew up in it. Brennan, favorite buddy?
I think I gotta go for the Hap and Leonard series. I really liked Two Bear Mambo a lot, and I'm still relatively early on. I've got some catching up to do, but the whole evil town thing, Joe, you mentioned there's you don't shy away from the social commentary, and Grovetown has it in spades. But it's got all the things that I love about those books. It's got, these, it makes me grimace because of the brutal things that these guys go through. I mean, they just, you can't write a book without kicking their poor asses up and down the street. It's got the humor, I'll tell you, in that book, I was crying, laughing at the fucking Christmas ants. When he
real story.
The story
real
about
story,
the Christmas
God.
ants in the cafe, I'm dying.
I was in a
happens.
cafe in a little town where I was visiting for some research on Hap and Leonard, and I had two big bruisers, come over, and I thought, well, it looks like I'm gonna have to, get active here and have a real fight, because they were very aggressive. And then they, what are you doing here? You from around here? No, I'm from Nacogdoches. What are you doing here? I said, I work for the health department. Well, what do you do at the health department? And I said, well, right now we're looking at the Christmas ants. And they said, what? I said, the Christmas ants. I said, haven't you heard about them? And then it's pretty much just like you see it in the book. I told that story, though. They did a version of it in the TV series, which was funny. But I told them that, and I kept telling them, I said, yeah, they're really big. And and I kept talking about, they're getting bigger and bigger. They've never seen anything like this. And I said, it's not well known, but I'm going to prepare you. There are whole towns where people have disappeared. And they just got all enraptured. And finally, the lady behind the counter said, he's pulling your leg. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to put that in the book. And I did.
That's even better knowing that. That's so much better.
And they thought it was funny. And, I diffused the situation. Because I've been in enough fights growing up where I grew up, and I didn't want to go there again, and even though to be honest with you, I was good at it. I was, a martial artist, and I was in my 40s, I guess, when I wrote that book. But it was interesting because I thought I'm going to diffuse this, and I did. And, but they really believed it. They thought I was from the health department, and they thought that they had to fear Christmas ants. And so when that lady behind the counter said, he's pulling your leg, then they both laughed, and we were all good, Did
you say one of them was working for the wastewater department? I thought you said something about sewers and whatnot.
He said he was working, he was pretending to work for the health department.
No. I know that Joe was, but I meant where Hap was. It doesn't matter. Okay, so Brennan, ask your question.
Oh, we may have. Who knows? It's been I've written so many of those kind of scenes, different things of that nature. I always try to find moments when the plot's not as important as it might be in those kind of books, where you have just little side trips. and you have little things that you learn about the people, you know, and that's important to me is, you know, people say there's an old saw that people have. They say never write anything in a book that isn't about the plot or slows down the plot. And I don't believe that at all. And I believe what makes books interesting is that they're unique and they have these, you know, moments in them that aren't about the plot. And that's harder to do than it looks, because for some people that can derail the whole story. So it's a balancing act, you know, but I like it.
That's life, man. In a novel, you can
Yeah.
get away with that. I'm gonna go with you, Brendan. Same answer. For the older ones, I've only read up to that one, and that's my favorite of the three so far. So ask your question, sir.
I was just gonna throw in there, you know, I love the humor, I love the beatings and stuff, that the violence in there. But it's what gets me. The reason I love these books is the friendship. You know, it's the way that, you know, Joe's able to embody and display, you know, the importance of just adult friendships, you know, in the books where they're a little older. You can't help but get a smile on your face, and it's in that one. It's in, you know, Bad Chili, to see just the lengths these two will go to support each other while constantly ribbing each other too. You know, it's so authentic, you know, that you're gonna have a friend that you'd go to the ends of the earth for, but you're still gonna rip on him while you're doing it.
Your brothers.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting
Yeah.
that
Yeah. And it's
you don't
juvenile
see-
humor too. You know,
Yeah.
they're very juvenile.
Of course.
you don't see many male friendship, or maybe more now, but especially when he started writing them, you didn't see a lot of male friendships put up that way. You know, it wasn't something that was celebrated. I mean, you see a lot of female friendships, and that's sort of a stereotypical thing, but I always thought that was an interesting piece that people really related to, because, you know, men aren't allowed to talk about how much they love their friend, you know, I mean, more so now, but especially 30 years ago, it was like, you know, even hearing two men platonically say, love you, man, like you hear that so much more now than I think you did even 5 years ago. You know, it just, those sorts of things, people need to feel like
Absolutely.
there are people that they can connect with.
I think that's really important too. And I mean, we've talked about this with you, Joe, before, but like, talk about people coming up to you and telling you how books have changed their life and for the better. And, you know, Hap and Leonard's it's a really good example to show. I mean, a black and a white guy, one, you know, redneck, one gay, angry, non-cliche male, both best friends, love each other. And at the end of the day, they love each other and in the purest of form. And that could help someone just realize it's okay.
You know, yeah, you know, it has. And I've had this many times, but I had one in Tulsa that I went up to. I went to a signing, and this was, I guess, about 3-4 years ago, whenever, you know, I did my last, I think 2019, probably. And the guy came up to me and you know, he was a kind of a bruiser guy. And he came to me and he said, I just wanted to thank you. And I said, well, what for? And he said, these taught me how to let go of my hate, how to let go of that anger. And I thought, if it did that for anybody, then the whole thing was worth doing, you know. And that makes you feel good, because that's really what, you know, you're writing books, you're writing for entertainment, but I've never been somebody that's looking for a pattern and looking for a way of doing it every time, and where everything always comes out just right. And it was fun to know that I had been able to put those social elements into it and for it to truly affect somebody. And he was talking about Black people and gay people, how he was able to let go of his feelings that before that, you know, his prejudices. And I thought, okay, you know, it was worth it.
That's amazing. I got one more question I want to throw to you, Brennan. Kasey, you and I talked a little while ago about a book that you and your father are working on together. I would love to hear anything that you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so we have a collection originally called Terror is Our Business, and it's two characters. One was a longstanding character that my dad had named Dana Roberts, and I had a character named Jana Davis. And we ended up doing a story that was not connected to Dad's original character, but we used my character in this story. And then we realized that those two characters really belonged in the same universe. And so we did this collection. It did really well. I mean, Sadie, before I even knew who Sadie was, she actually reviewed it. So, and before she knew who we were, it was like she was just doing her books, her book reviews. And now I go back and I'm like, oh, and now we're friends. Yeah, that's funny. So yeah, we actually just made that sort of realization not long ago. But it was a really fun project, and it was different than the way Dad normally writes. And I was able to bring in sort of a side of things that are probably a lighter, in that particular circumstance, more humorous side of things. And then we have a new collection coming out that includes those stories, but it also has a new Dana and Jana story that was recently published in a Sherlock Holmes collection. So they are all reprints, but they're being collected together. And those characters are fun. They don't have the same love as Hap and Leonard, but they have a respect. And I think that as the characters evolve, as those stories continue to grow, it could get there. I don't know, because that's not really the structure of who Dana specifically is. But I think that having the respect will really allow them to grow and let the narrative kind of go much further than we intended it to originally. And then we also have a collection coming out called Dark Kin, which are stories that he and I have done together. I think they're all duos. And then we have a new story in that called Sea Legs, and that will be coming out as a limited collection from Thunderstorm Books. So those are the two sort of in the
Nice.
work projects.
That's
That's
awesome.
exciting.
Yeah, so it's fun, and I like doing work with him.
we
It's like I was telling somebody yesterday, it's a master class, and I'm trying to find my voice. I'm trying to learn from him. I'm trying to find my voice. I'm trying to not let his voice overcrowd mine, but I'm also trying to listen and learn and sort of let that blending come about naturally. And the more that we have done it, the more that I've sort of seen the pacing. I think pacing for me has always been maybe the most important thing for me to sort of sit back and watch, because I either want to do it all up front or I want to over explain it. So kind of seeing how he's laid it out. And I feel like, everybody that goes to the writers workshops and things like that, I'm like, well, I have this great opportunity to do a one-on-one writer workshop. So I'm going to take it. And it's fun, and if the other thing is, like, I'll always have this thing that we've done together that's always going to live on. And I think that's pretty special too.
Absolutely. But
I love that.
real quick shout out Thunderstorm Books, Paul Goblet. He's he's got a great thing going on for anyone interested. Great books.
We should also mention one of those isn't from Thunderstorm. The first one, the Dana, is from SST, and then Thunderstorm is the Dark Kin. So they're both, great publishers, and we're
Both
excited
Pauls.
to be with
Pauls
them.
are good people.
Paul Fry, yeah,
We like all the Pauls.
he is. He's good. Yeah, Pauls are good people. That's right. The thing about those collection, if I can just add this real quick, is that I learned from Kasey too, and I've learned from Keith with working with them, because they make you, I think, get in touch with your younger self, or your, if not necessarily younger, your more original self in the way that you're trying to figure out how to get it done. And it reteaches you things that you've gotten maybe kind of sloppy with, or maybe just felt like that you're, you haven't noticed it as much. So you learn a lot. And I do think, and I say this not because it's Kasey, but I do honestly think that the best Dana and Jana stories are the ones that she worked on too, because she kind of controlled those. I think maybe the last one I started the pages, but before that, all the others that we did together, she would start them, and then I would write, kind of do a few things with that and write a little to it. Then she'd do it. Then we'd both go over it. But I really felt like that everything beginning with Blind Love are really kind of Kasey's stories in a way. And maybe the last one's a little bit more 50-50, but I felt like the others were a little bit more like 60-40, and maybe a little more than that, because she kind of controlled them. And when I did the original Dana stories, I tried to do them like the old Karnacki, Ghost Finder and all those sort of, psychic detectives and things like that. And I think I did it a little too well. They were a little too stiff. And I think that Kasey added, the humor back into them, which is always weird because that's kind of what I'm known for. But those weren't very humorous. They were just straightforward. And I think she brought a factor to that. And I believe too that I'm not a teacher in that I'll say you got to do it this way. I'm kind of like, you try it that way and see what you think. See how that works. And I know that's aggravating to people sometimes because they want specific answers, but I just don't believe in that.
Yeah,
because
I'll
I feel
ask
like
him,
I will.
what's wrong with it? I don't know. There's just something right here that needs to be fixed.
Right.
Can you
Yeah, I
give
don't want to
me
impose
something
my,
else?
yeah, I don't want to impose my approach to it because then you don't learn your approach to it. But you can feed people things. You can kind of like knock them back into play. And once in a while I'll say, yeah, the characters aren't quite, up to snuff or, this dollar. But I always try to keep it reasonably general so that whoever I'm working with, be it Kasey or be it Keith or, my wife and I worked like that too. And it didn't work like that. She's the boss. It's the end of that. But in those two, with working with them, I kind of let them try to find themselves, and because I know that if they're going to write things on their own, once they find themselves, they can do that. And Kasey's written a number of stories on her own. I don't know exactly how many, but almost enough for a collection.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's trying to find, again, it's like finding my voice, finding the things that are speaking to me, and then also sort of having this imposed, maybe self-imposed even expectation of what a Lansdale story should look like. And so that's been sort of where when we go through our work together is I really want to make sure that my voice is there, but we are still coming with our own, our own mindsets, our own voices. And so kind of finding that blend. And I think of everything we've done, the Dana Jana stories really hit that sweet spot.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Brennan.
And Kasey and I are probably closer in style than my son and I. My son and I have other ways we think that are very similar, but Kasey and I have very similar styles and humor. And so, you find people's strengths and you find your own working with other people, because I hate collaborating. And the only person that I like collaborating with are my kids. And Kasey and I have done it more than Keith and I have done it, but I generally don't like it. And I didn't want to do it with her originally. And I turned it down a couple of times.
Yeah, the first time that we actually got asked, it was Christopher Golden asked if we wanted to do a story together. And I was, yeah, of course. And then he asked Dad, and Dad was like, nope. So I started the story and I wrote the first like 3 or 4 pages. And I said, Christopher, just watch. And I sent him the story. And then a little bit later, I get an email, I hate you, and it's Dad, because he started writing on the story because I knew he couldn't let a story linger. I knew if I just put it in front of him, his brain would start activating and then we'd have a go.
Oh, but, no, you just opened the floodgates for fans of Joe.
Joe, you're about to get a lot of emails with 3 or 4 pages of a story idea. They'll all be from Patrick, though.
Don't tell him my secrets. Brennan, just ask your question, man.
I love the idea of you guys collaborating. I think that's such a special thing to be able to do with family. That's so cool. And the fact that you guys have voices that complement each other is just, I love it. There's no better way to put it. I love it. So I want to talk about Pandy Press, but I have no idea who to address first, because I want to know kind of where the idea originated, where this whole thing started. So out in the air you go.
It's Kasey.
Did I take? I mean, I don't want to presume. Okay, so Pandy Press, thanks for asking. In 2014, Dad and I realized that we wanted to start housing his backlist, and that we wanted to start putting all of those titles in one place, either to have them organized for reselling or to eventually just have complete ownership as they went out of print from some of the publishers. Now, his major novels, those are all still in print from publishers, but some of these novellas, some of the small collections, after they've gone out of print, we've started to slowly house them. 2014, we put up 3 backlist titles, Fine Dark Line, Freezer Burn, and a third one that is escaping me in this moment that probably
Hot in
everybody
December?
else knows. Hot, no,
Big Blow.
Big Blow, yeah.
Oh.
And so we had 3 titles online available. If someone knew to search for them, they could get them print on demand, ebook. That's it. It was sort of a quiet, we exist, we're housing these books, and if you need them, this is where you can get them. And then we've been slowly making a list of other backlist titles with the intention of one day in our lives releasing them. So I thought, well, this will be a nice thing to retire into. And then pandemic hit and I was suddenly retired. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe this is a really interesting time to explore this. So it's sort of lingered. And then I talked to Jonathan, who is my boyfriend, but also happens to be an InDesign expert, a graphic design layout book person that all the Fortune 500 companies have brought him in to teach them how to do books. And so as we're talking about it, I start realizing that in this house, we basically have the makings of a publishing company, because the other part of the backlist was there's a lot of backlists, guys. Like this, he's been a busy boy, and it's expensive to lay out and design and create covers and do all those things for that many titles. So the fact that we have someone in-house who's able to do them, now granted, he's one man, so it the process turns at the pace it does, but eventually we'll have more titles up. We now have 8 or 9, and we're putting up a new one every 2 weeks, give or take, depending on how much work has to do with recreating the layout. It also depends on if there's a digital file, because a lot of these backlist stories Dad wrote before there was computers. So we have to find these tools and put them together. So as we started doing that, we sort of decided like, oh, we actually want to move forward with this, with the intention of taking all the backlist, collecting it in one place, and eventually releasing new stories from new authors. So we signed one author who is a good friend of ours, who knows that he's sort of in this journey with us, and his name's Del Howson. And we're going to put out one of his books next year, and I'll just kind of pin it for there because we're working all that out. But throughout this process of sort of discovery, Dad is basically, he's the Pandy VP, because the backlist is all his, and none of this would exist without him there. He gets cover approval. He gets all these things that are, part of that process. We have him sort of more on the author side of things, though, because we do intend to expand. We do intend to bring in other works. And that's part of what we're doing right now with our distribution securement, and just sort of deciding how best to move forward, learning about how to do promotion, all of these things. So as we're learning these tools, as I'm in a pandemic world, I'm not doing music in the same way. I'm not touring all the time. I'm not on the road all the time. So I started working with Tachyon Publications during that time, and I'm doing some of their publicity. So one of the books that I'm working is Born for Trouble, which I think is how we all connected initially, was just letting people know, hey, this book exists. So as I'm learning this process, and having only been on the author side of it, both as an observer and a writer, I'm now seeing all of these tools and these people that are in this world, and I'm seeing them constantly. And there's this one person that I just keep seeing everywhere. And I'm like, who is this Mother Horror lady? And then I started looking, I'm like, she's everywhere. Everybody knows her. And then somehow, I don't even remember how we got connected. And then I don't know if I reached out to you, or no, you know what? You might have reached out to me for Body Shocks.
Yeah, I actually don't remember. It might have been Ellen's Body Shocks.
I don't
think
remember.
we were working together through Tachyon first.
Yeah. And
right?
I had seen you everywhere. And I was just like, who is this person who is just like taking over the internet and the world at the same time that I'm sitting here like, what's going on? And then we connected, and then I'll maybe say to you, kind of take your role here.
Yeah, so, and I was, kind of dabbling in working with publishers with their social media platforms, and because social media is just something that I self-taught myself, like how to do and kind of do it well. Like, I don't know, I just hit on some kind of way to connect with people that just works. And I think a lot of publishers just don't have the time for engagement on social media and to make posts and to keep that up regularly. So I was kind of helping several different publishers. And then, well, you just invited me to like work alongside you, Kasey. Just being like, would you want to come on board? Is this something you would want to do? And in the same time, I also had a phone conversation with Joe, kind of about the same thing. And then I'll talk to Joe about something and go back and tell Kasey, and then Kasey will tell me something and I'll go to Joe and be excited about it. And we just realized that we all just kind of like each other and it would be a good fit to work together.
Well, yeah, and it's fun because also
Right.
you were also doing some stuff for Moon Lake for us. So I wasn't working Moon Lake officially. I was just like, my daddy has a new book. So,
Yeah.
so you were doing that. And then I know you had somebody who wanted copies, and then we were trying to figure out how to do that. So it just, what we realized is like, we had a really nice way of interacting. And it was like, every time something came up, it felt fine. It felt safe. It felt good. And I think that when you find those relationships with people, you run with it, and the timing was really it couldn't have been better timing, because something in her time frame changed. And I said, well, as soon as that changed, it just so happens that we need the exact skill set that you have that none of us can do. And I mean, we've all seen the work that she does. So we know the quality, and we know the way that people respond. And like you say, is you do connect with people in that way. And that's harder than people realize, to do it over the internet, in that way. So now
There's another thing. Sorry, Kasey, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I got that delay. Go ahead.
Okay. So now having her sort of as the brand ambassador has been so important, and just a good marriage of it all. Go ahead, Dad. Sorry.
I would just, no, I didn't mean to step on you. I get that delay once in a while, and I think something's done, and then I step on your toes. I apologize for that. No, but I think Sadie's got something else too, and you got it too, Kasey. Both of you guys have got charisma, and it's even when you can do it over Twitter, that's something different. And because anybody can do Twitter, and anybody can learn how to do it, but like you said, Sadie, you're self-taught. I'm self-taught. Kasey's self-taught. We're all self-taught people. And I think that makes us more dedicated, and it probably makes us more proud of ourselves. We think, yeah, we work hard. We're proud of ourselves. And I think that's a good thing. But I do think that y'all do have a charisma that comes across on those things. And that's something that you really can't teach someone. So, and I don't know whether you can be proud of it, or you just say that's genetics or what, but whatever, it's a hell of a tool. It's a hell of a tool.
Well, and Sadie and I have talked about this. She loves the authors, and you love the work, and the work. You're not just a social media person. You love fiction.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Yeah. And I used to kind of associate myself in the reviewer circle, and just kind of like align with reviewers, because that's what I was doing for Cemetery Dance and Scream magazine. But that evolution has kind of landed me in a more, I don't know, like in other circles. Like I do find myself aligning with authors and publishers and that side of the business as well. So I do kind of find like, if you can stand in all the camps and just kind of be empathetic to where everybody is, then that makes you a really key component. I don't know what really to say about it, but I don't find that I advocate for any one party in this industry. I feel like I can be really empathetic towards every part of I sell the horror, I read the horror, I review the horror. Like, it's like I am in all the different circles. So,
well, and even though you're Mother Horror,
Kasey's
you
like
do
that
more
too,
than that.
Yeah,
She
you do. I was
is.
just gonna say Kasey's like that too. She's a writer. She's a publisher. She's seen all sides of it and grew up in it. She'd go to New York with me, and when I would meet editors or when we went to film people or whatever. And you, Sadie, you're constantly interacting with all these people, and that's the difference. You're looking at it from someone who enjoys this, but you also have a unique platform and you have a unique ability, and Kasey does too. And I'm not just saying that because you guys are on my team. I would trust you even if you were wrong, because I think that it's an attitude that matters. And if you got somebody in your camp, they're in your camp, and that was good. I always think about that with Bill Paxton. We were saying one time that we were friends, but we didn't always trust each other's judgment. So you can still, but you can trust what people are doing and let them do your thing. And in y'all's case, I do trust your judgment. And in the short time that Kasey's been doing this, her experience and the things that she has grown into have amazed me. But then I get to thinking she's almost been training for it from out of the womb, without even realizing she was training for it.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's, pandemic really changed a lot of things in my path, and I'm not sure what that means for the future or what will kind of revert back and what won't. But a lot of things that I always thought would sort of exist in the ether presented themselves much sooner and much closer than I expected. And in a way where it's been fun to reach out to people and people, oh my God, I met you when you were like 14 at this convention and blah, 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 blah. Or I saw you at this event, or I came to your signing at such, and it's been kind of like a big family reunion of getting to connect with people that you didn't even realize that you had met or impacted, or that they would even remember. And then for me as a child that I, in some cases, don't remember just because, it was so long ago. So it's been a really nice sort of discovery, and something that is a lot more natural than I expected it to be. But now that I'm in it, I don't know why that seemed like a question.
Well, when you were growing up, you'd have Don Coscarelli at the house. You'd have Richard Christian Matheson and David Scow, and they were all just folks. Those were just like uncles or something, and so you didn't think about that. Keith didn't either. And I think that I think the good thing about that is neither one of them grew up in awe of people who did those sort of things, were directed and wrote and were artists, and you might, but I think it developed a deep respect as they begin to realize, oh, that's what those guys do, that's what those ladies do, that sort of thing. So I do think that you're training without even know you're training, so that's a good thing. And I think Kasey was fortunate in that Karen and I were doing well enough that the kids got to travel all over the world. They got to meet all kinds of people in different countries. Kasey lived in Italy a little bit and it speaks Italian to some degree. And she spent a lot of time there and learned a lot of cultural things that she would never have experienced in East Texas. My biggest fear is that she would grow up with somebody that all they wanted to do was drive around the pickup and spit tobacco out the open window. And if you're one of those guys, I'm sorry, that's it. That's not who I envision as my daughter's mate.
You're her dad,
but
you want the best for her,
man. At least be experienced. So at least if he spit tobacco, he was somebody that appreciated books and art and what have you. And so we tried to give them an opportunity to learn for themselves. Say, here you're exposed to this, go do it. Whether I don't know if you went to the Louvre, didn't you, on your own, didn't you, Kasey, or did you when you were in France? But stuff like that, going to all these different places that when you're in East Texas growing up, not only do you not normally have that opportunity, most people, and I would have been one too growing up, because I'm very much a poor East Texan. I would have known what the Louvre was. I thought that was maybe some kind of window or something that you crank down.
Speaking of Dawn, this is a terrible segue, but Bubba Hotep, that or Act of Love, will that come out through Pandy Press?
Okay, so Act of Love has gone back and forth, because depending on what day you ask Dad, he either says okay or I don't want that back in print. So So I'm going to say yes because I'm going to catch him on a day where he'll say yes. So yes.
Send him 3 pages of really anything that has to do with
I'm going to
that.
send him 3 pages of active love and be like, what do you think about this story? And then, and then Bubba, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, active love. I did see, Joe, you said recently that you kind of tackled that subject before Thomas Harris did with Red Dragon. And I haven't read
that as well.
I have not read Active Love yet, but Red Dragon is one of my favorite books ever. So that caught my attention.
It's a great book. Yeah.
And Kasey, you were going to say Bubba Hotep. Are you guys getting that one?
Well, that I don't know. Dad, did we get Bubba Hotep back?
Well, it's currently in print with a couple. It's in the Best of Joe R. Lansdale from Tachyon, and it's also in Bubba and the Cosmic Bloodsuckers, which it's also included in there. But you know, it's a story. It can be somewhere else, so it may happen. But you know, before we go too much farther, I know that this is probably getting past Sadie's bedtime and my own.
Yeah.
So if you guys are tired, because I go to bed early too.
I definitely do. We're the old timers in this lot.
Oh, I'm so okay. I have bags under my eyes. So I'm good too.
We're all tired.
So if it's all right with you guys, we can skip this question. If anyone wants to jump in, that's fine. This is kind of the wrap down question, which we always start with. What are you reading? I'd like to talk about 2 quick ones. Just show them real quick. That's all right with you guys. The first one is Ronald Kelly's memoir. It's coming out in September, and he's oh man, how do I say this? Well, it sounded like a smartass. He is an old timer like Joe, and I mean that with a love. And then one that I'm diving into soon, and Sadie, I think you read this, Red X by David Demchuk. Yeah. So I'm really excited to read this. It has deckled pages. Can't really see it. Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, so I'm excited to read that. That's mine. Brennan.
I am reading Celeste by Maria O'Regan. It's about an immortal woman who preys on adoration, for lack of better words. She basically seduces men and uses it to live forever. It's actually it's a really cool book. Maria O'Regan is the wife of Paul Kane, who does a lot of work with writes a lot of the Hellraiser stuff, Sherlock Holmes and the Cenobites, and she's got a little touch of that almost kind of demonic to it. I'm also reading Tyler Jones's Burn the Plans. He is one of my favorite people, one of my favorite writers, and this his short story collection does not disappoint. It's fantastic. There's a story in there called Trigger that I think a lot of people are really, really gonna love, and I hope to read more in that universe from him.
Sadie, what are you reading?
I'm finishing up My Sister, the Serial Killer. This is like a really slim read, and I've been kind of like going right through it. And I'm gonna start Hide by Kirsten White. And this is like a like people are playing a game. It's they're trapped in like a abandoned theme park, which is like, yes, please. And then I'm gonna read The House Next Door by Anne Rivers Sidens. I haven't read
it's wonderful.
One.
It's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
yeah. Everybody loves this book, so I need to get into it. It's Joe approved.
She wrote some rather Southern novels too that are quite good. I haven't read all of them, but they're kind of straight novels, and but you're gonna love that one. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm excited.
Kasey, what about you?
I am actually, I held it up for the visual aid. I'm reading The Pledge from Kathleen Kent. So I'm listening to it on audiobook, and I read the first 2, The Dime and The Burn. And I just finished S.A. Cosby's Razor Blade Tears.
Ugh, did you die a little death?
I did. But you know what? It was interesting for me, and I mean this in all the positive ways. It felt so much like a combination of Cold in July and Happen Leonard done, but done in a new take, that it was so it was comfortable and warm, and like I knew them, but I didn't know them. And it was really, I really loved it. And he's such a good writer and such a nice person. So it was a nice surprise, because I feel like the last few books I've started in from other authors, it was a nice, like, wow, this really hit me feeling. And it's been a few books since I've had a wow, this hit me feeling.
That's awesome. Joe.
Yeah, I was just going to say first, before I talk about that, is like Kathleen Kent is a wonderful writer, and I love her work. And Cosby's a great writer too, and he's been kind enough often to say that he was influenced by my work, but he does his own thing.
Yeah.
What I'm reading right now is Blood and Treasure. It's about Daniel Boone and about the settling of the frontier, and about how it disrupted the Native Americans, and it's just fantastic. And it's a big book about like that. About halfway through it. I'm one of those guys that reads about 3 or 4 a week normally, but I've lately, for some reason, I've been reading about 1 a week. But I'm also reading, I have a different room where I read different books. I'm reading The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell, which I've just started, and I'm liking it so far too.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds really cool. The Western expansion. That's really neat.
Yeah, it's a historical. This one.
That's a fast.
So, and the other one's history too. I love history, and a lot of the things that I like to read and write are either novels of historical periods, or they're nonfiction books about history.
Like Alma Katsu. She's pretty good at that. Let's go to where can people follow you. Let's start with you, Sadie. And Nightworms. Mention Nightworms, please.
Okay. So I'm pretty much everywhere. You can find me on Facebook the least amount, and I'm on Twitter pretty actively, and also Instagram at Mother Horror for all of those, or Sadie Hartmann. I've been using Sadie Hartmann a lot more than, people call me Mother Horror, but my name is Sadie Hartmann. I don't make my kids call me Mother Horror.
I think you should.
I know, right?
Kasey, what about you?
Everything's /Kasey Lansdale. And I'm not on Twitter much, because I had a really nice verified padded account with all these people that I love to interact with. And then it got stolen by Japanese hackers, and I've never gotten it back. So I have an account, and I pop on from time to time, but only so that I can basically go on and like hate stalk my original account and see if I can ever get it back. I think they actually took it down now, so it's gone forever.
You should write a story about that.
Oh my God.
That's horrible.
And I'd say I'm more active on Instagram /Kasey Lansdale. I'm Facebook, and I guess that's Kasey Lansdale Fans. And then I'm on there, from time to time. I've taken a big step back from social media in the last 2 years, just because social media in the last 2 years. And I'm just now starting
to Kasey's stuff a lot.
Yeah, it's like between stalkers and stealers and all these things. I'm like, can I just? So I'm starting to come back on and put a little bit more out there. But Kasey Lansdale, yeah, long answer. You're welcome.
What about you, Joe? Where can people follow you, sir?
I was just going to say before I say that is that a lot of times I'll be looking through and I'll see a picture of Kasey and it's somebody else's thing. They've stole her photograph and
That's
put
so
it there.
weird.
I mean, you can't have anything nice. Somebody's always got to mess it up. What's funny though, I just got a text from George Martin, and he said that they're just about finished with doing all the special effects on that Night of the Cooters that I mentioned earlier.
Nice.
So it looks like that. Yeah. Vincent and I both didn't think it would be done by then, but George was right. It is going to be done by then.
Oh, wow.
Probably
That's
because
like a live
George
update.
is pressuring them. But you can find me on Twitter, and I have a fan page. There's a Facebook page listed, but I don't have anything to do with that. It's got me there, Joe Lansdale and all that, but I don't ever.
Well, there's a lot. There's more than we have time for, because we got locked out of the fan page, and then he had to create a thing because he wasn't grandfathered in. So there's like a ghost page, and then there's it's a lot of technology. We can't all be Sadie Hartmann, okay? So
yeah. Well, I do have a fan page that I use a lot, and but I don't do any things where I friend people, or because I don't look at other people's Facebooks very often, very rarely. I check Kasey's and Keith's.
I was gonna say
once
you
in a
creep on
while,
mine.
and yeah, and that's about it. Those two are about the only ones I check. And and when you have a fan page, you don't friend people.
Right.
They come to it. And then I have a www.joerlansdale web page. So those are my three main ones. There's also this cool Joe Lansdale collecting page, though, if you get interested in that I go to and check just about every day so I can learn something about my work that I've forgotten. And that's really happened. And they've had things on. I've never seen that before. Where did that come from? And I had a Korean edition today. I didn't know there was a Korean edition.
Cool.
My agent sent this picture today of the Korean edition, and they've got stuff that sells all over the world, and you don't always get copies of them. Some of them I do. So it's kind of cool to at least get to see the covers, even if I don't get the books for whatever reason.
That's
I
really
get paid, but
Oh, I forgot to mention Nightworms too.
Go for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I co-own Nightworms with my business partner, Ashley, and we are a monthly horror book subscription company. Yeah, so check out Nightworms.
Sadie, how
everybody raves about Nightworms.
can I'm gonna ask it on air. I have tried to buy the boxes. It's always sold out.
Yeah, it is like, so people have asked us why we haven't really like scaled our business beyond, just selling out the minute we list packages. But to be totally honest with you, like Ashley and I don't want to work that hard. We also don't want to like have to get a distributor to do our work for us, which would be the next step. Like we're literally almost squeezed out of the space that we're in right now. And we want quality control. So we still hand package everything ourselves. And we look at everything before it goes into the packages with our small little team of people. And we don't want to get any bigger than that. Like we're fine. We're doing fine. We're enjoying ourselves. It's manageable. Like to scale even a little bit more would be too much. So when we list, we're at like, here's our cap, and then here's our number of subscribers. So when we list, there's a little room for people to squeeze in, and then they're gone.
The videos you guys post, that's really cool. I did want to talk about that super quick. It's really interesting to see that, because you guys do put a lot of hard work in there, and something on social media that kind of people seem to be, and myself included, seem to be wary about is like, I don't want to come off like I'm being braggadocious or whatever, but it's nice to see that like you guys put in hard work, and to actually see the pallets off the trucks, to see how much work it gives you even more respect for how much hard work you guys put into that. And yeah, so check that out. Was that nightworms.com?
Yeah, nightworms.com. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, next episode 138 will be LM Labatt. Did I get that right, Brennan?
I don't know.
Thank you guys for joining us. Seriously, this was a really special episode.
Of course. Thanks for having us. It was nice seeing everyone.
You got,
Thanks,
yeah, you
guys.
too.
Much appreciated to be here.